Hi, good morning and good evening to our dear friends across the globe. Welcome to the webinar today. I'm Sharon Kell. I'm an internist and geriatrician with an MPH in epidemiology. I was trained in medicine at the University of Alabama and was an assistant professor of medicine for 7 years, practicing medicine, teaching and conducting research. But since then, I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for over 24 years, holding positions at Novartis, where I was scientific director of Med Affairs, Johnson & Johnson, working in Med Affairs and clinical R&D, at Impax Pharmaceuticals as VP of Clinical R&D, Med Affairs, and Pharmacovigilance, at Amneal Pharmaceuticals as a VP in Drug Safety, and then Prevention as a SVP in Clinical Development. And currently I have my own consulting business. The topic for today's webinar is PADERs and PSURs, Unravelling the Enigma. As you know, during the post-authorization phase, the global safety experience of the product needs to be presented to the reg authorities in a periodic manner in accordance with their rigorous, stringent regulations. And needless to say, a comprehensive and in-depth review of all the new and emerging safety information is vital to ascertain the benefit and risk ratio of the drug. AWINSA, with its scrupulous knowledge of regulatory requirements honed by years of experience, highlights the tips and tricks of preparing robust PADERs and PSURs in this webinar. But before we begin, I would like to draw your attention to some of the housekeeping guidelines. In this webinar today, Sanjeev Miglani and Mugdha Chopra, who are co-founders and directors of AWINSA, will talk in detail about the management of PADERs and PSURs. At this onset, I would like to cover these housekeeping topics. You're welcome to post your questions during the webinar, and we will do our level best to address your questions. But in case we're not able to answer your questions due to time constraints, we will try to respond to you via email. The webinar will be available for download on demand after a couple of days. And at this time, I'm going to hand the floor over to Mugdha and Sanjeev, who are going to start today's presentation.
Thanks, Sharon. My colleague, Dr. Mugdha, will talk about the PADERs part. So before she starts talking about the PADERs, I'll just briefly introduce her. So Dr. Mugdha Chopra is the co-founder and director of AWINSA Life Sciences. She has over 16 years of experience, including pharmacovigilance and clinical research. She was associate vice president for USPV and clinical safety at APSUR in her last role before starting AWINSA, and she was overseeing the delivery and operation from India over there at APSUR, which included but not limited to case processing and aggregate reporting, literature monitoring, and signal detection. And before joining APSUR, she was with Ranbaxy as a manager in the Department of Medical Affairs and Pharmacovigilance. She comes with an extensive experience in various safety databases like Argus and RSG for case processing, reporting, and product license management. And she's also met various challenges of business continuity planning and data restoration. Over to Mugdha.
Thank you so much, Sharon, and thank you, Sanjeev, for the nice introduction. In the webinar today, we will be talking about the PADERs and the PSURs. I'll be speaking on periodic adverse drug experience reports, and Dr. Sanjeev Miglani will be giving an in-depth insight on the periodic safety update reports. We'll be covering the following topics in today's webinar: objectives of periodic reports, principles and regulations of PADERs, and the sectional review of PADERs, which I'll be talking about. And Dr. Sanjeev will walk us through the regulations and sectional review of the PSURs. But before I start my presentation, I would like to lay down the principles why any periodic report is required to be submitted. So from safety perspective, comprehensive and critical analysis of the evolving information on the risks and benefits must be identified and reported. All of this is clearly reflected in the aggregate reports, which are required to be prepared as a part of the pharmacovigilance requirement. Aggregate reports are the reports which emphasize on the evaluation of safety profile and benefit risk of any product. And aggregate report, so as to say, is the process which reviews the cumulative safety information from a wide range of sources on a periodic basis and submit the findings to the regulatory authorities. Aggregate reports are required both during pre-marketing and post-marketing stages of a product. PADERs and PSURs are the aggregate reports prepared during the post-marketed stages of the product. And as we are progressing in pharmacovigilance, it's all about evaluation of risks at the periodic intervals and presenting them in specific formats as defined by the regulations in different countries. We have to highlight the risks or the relevant new safety information of the product. And another important objective is to establish whether information recorded during the reporting period is in accordance with the previously existing knowledge of drug safety, and it helps to determine whether any changes should be made to the product labeling. The most important objective of periodic reports is to evaluate the benefit risk profile of the approved medicinal product in the light of new or changing post-approval information. So there are different regulations or guidelines governing the preparation and submission of the periodic adverse drug experience reports in the US. 21 CFR 314.80, that is post-marketing reporting of adverse drug experience for new drug applications. Similarly, 21 CFR 314.98 is for the post-marketing reports for the generic drugs, that is ANDAs, and the post-marketing reporting of adverse experiences for biologics, which is detailed in 21 CFR 600.80. And as we all know, we have a draft guidance document too, which is published by FDA in March 2001 regarding the post-marketing safety reporting for human drugs and biological products. This guidance document provides the details regarding the format requirements and content of the PADERs to be submitted to US FDA. As I mentioned in the beginning, that there are different timelines and frequency of submission of the periodic reports based on the regulatory reporting requirements in different countries. Post-marketing periodic reports are required to be submitted to the FDA for each approved NDA, ANDA, and BLA, and are due quarterly for the first 3 years after US approval of the application and annually thereafter. Periodic reports due quarterly must be submitted within 30 calendar days of the last day of the reporting quarter, and reports due annually must be submitted each year within 60 calendar days of the anniversary date of the US approval of the application of the drug or the biological product. And each page of the periodic report should be numbered and include the name and NDA or the ANDA number if the periodic report is for the drug product. For the biological product, the periodic report should include the name and submission tracking number, that is STN of the biological product. Now, before I go into the sectional review and the content of the PADER, I would like to highlight few regulatory aspects of the PADERs. That is, initial non-15-day reports should be included in the periodic report in separate section from non-15-day follow-up reports. All initial and follow-up information obtained for an adverse experience with a given periodic reporting period should be combined and submitted in the periodic report as one initial non-15-day report. This means that an initial non-15-day report and a non-15-day follow-up report describing the same adverse experience should not be submitted in the same periodic report. And when I say non-15-day reports for submission in PADERs, these include spontaneously reported cases originating from the US, that is serious listed, non-serious listed, and non-serious unlisted cases. So serious listed or non-serious cases coming from literature or any country other than the US, that is any foreign case, they are not required to be included in the PADER. Another very important point, and which makes sense as well, is that serious unexpected adverse experience reports should not be reported to the US FDA again as the E2B report via ESG gateway, along with the PADER, as these should have been previously submitted to the FDA as a 15-day alert report. Non-15-day cases, that is domestic spontaneous, serious listed, and non-serious cases, are the only reports which are required to be submitted as E2B reports via ESG gateway along with the PADER. If no adverse experiences were identified for the human drug or the biological product for the time period involved and no regulatory actions concerning safety were taken anywhere in the world where the product is marketed, the periodic report can state this and be submitted to the FDA along with a copy of the current US labeling. Now, again, some regulatory aspects are that there are certain waivers that FDA grants to the applicant holders for the PADERs. One of the waiver is submission of FDA Form 3500A for non-serious expected adverse experiences, or we can say submission of non-serious expected adverse experiences as E2B reports to the US FDA along with the PADER, as we no longer submit the MedWatch forms to the FDA now. All these submissions to the FDA are now done electronically, and applicants are encouraged to request a waiver for submission to FDA of the individual case safety reports of non-serious expected adverse experiences that at a minimum contain 4 basic elements. In such cases, applicants should maintain records of these non-serious expected adverse experiences in their safety database, and FDA may request that an applicant submit these cases to the FDA upon their request. And when FDA requests these cases, then they expect that these cases should be submitted within 5 calendar days after the receipt of the request. And applicants who obtain a waiver for the requirement to submit individual case safety reports of non-serious expected adverse experiences would still be expected to submit information of these adverse experiences to the FDA in the summary tabulation section of the periodic adverse drug experience report. So the FDA does not intend to grant waiver request for new biological molecular entities within 1 year of licensure, or for the blood products or plasma derivatives or vaccines. And FDA believes that it is important to continue periodic report of or periodic review of all individual case safety reports of adverse experiences for these products to identify safety problems due to lot-to-lot variations, and also to monitor the safety of newly approved biological products. Now, there can also be a waiver which is granted for submission of PADER in the PSUR format. Applicant holders can request a waiver to submit the PADER in PSUR format as described in ICH E2C. However, in these situations, FDA expects certain additional requirements to be followed by the applicant holders. That is, if all dosage forms and formulations for the active substance as well as indications are considered in one PSUR, this information should be separated into specific sections of the report when such separation is appropriate to accurately portray the safety profile of the specific dosage form. For example, the information from ophthalmic drop dosage form and solid oral dosage form should not be combined in the single PSUR. One copy of the PSUR should be submitted for each approved NDA or ANDA whose product is covered in the PSUR. And then non-15-day cases that are required to be submitted as per the regulations should be submitted with PSUR as well. And a waiver for submission of certain non-serious expected adverse experience can be requested from the FDA, as we were discussing about the waivers of the non-serious expected cases in the earlier slide. Now, with the PSUR as well, a summary tabulation should be included as an appendix listing all spontaneously reported US ICSRs from consumers if such cases are not already included in the PSUR. And summary tabulation should be presented by a body system of all adverse experience terms and counts of occurrences, and be segregated by the type, that is serious unexpected or serious expected, or non-serious unexpected and non-serious expected. And again, a narrative should be included as an appendix that references the changes, if any, to the approved US labeling for the dosage forms covered by the PSUR based on new information in the PSUR. A copy of the most recently approved US labeling of the product covered by PSUR should be included along with the PSUR. Now, another waiver is regarding the submission date and the frequency of the reports if submitted in the PSUR format. So, as far as the submission for PADERs is concerned, these are submitted on a quarterly basis from the US approval date of the product. So, applicants can request a waiver to submit PSURs to the FDA based on the month and day of the international birth date of the product instead of the month and day of the anniversary date of US approval of the product. So the waiver request should specify that these PSURs would be submitted to the FDA within 60 calendar days of the data log point, that is month and day of the international birth date of the product or any other day agreed on by the applicant and the FDA. So as per the regulations, the PADER need to contain a narrative summary and analysis of the information in the report and an analysis of the 15-day alert report submitted during the reporting interval. They should also include non-15-day reports for each spontaneously reported adverse experience occurring in the United States that was not reported in a 15-day alert report, and a history of actions taken since the last report because of adverse experiences. The information contained within a post-marketing report should be divided into 4 sections and should be clearly separated by an identifying tab. And if information for one of the sections is not included, the applicant should simply explain why the information was not provided in the PADER for this particular section. Now, there are different sections of the PADER, and PADER format as expected by US FDA as per the regulations should have 4 sections. Section 1 is the narrative summary and analysis. Section 2 being narrative discussions of action taken. Section 3 is the index line listing, and Section 4 is the FDA Form 3500A, that is non-15-day cases included in the PADER. And there are certain appendices too, which have to be included in the PADER, and I'll be talking about these sections and these appendices in detail in my subsequent slides. So now Section 1, narrative summary and analysis, should include a narrative summary and analysis of the information in the PADER and analysis of 15-day reports, that is serious unexpected adverse experiences submitted during the reporting period. And this section should include the information about number of non-15-day initial adverse experience reports and the number of non-15-day follow-up reports contained in the PADER and the time period covered by the report. The non-15-day cases cover serious expected, non-serious unexpected, and non-serious expected cases, which are reported spontaneously and that too specifically from the US. Any serious expected case or non-serious case which are reported in literature or any such spontaneous cases with country of origin other than US, that is the foreign cases, they are not required to be included in the PADER. One should also include a list of 15-day reports submitted to the FDA during the reporting period, and 15-day reports submitted under that particular NDA or ANDA or BLA can be from any report source, that is spontaneous, literature, or clinical trial, and it can be domestic or foreign. So irrespective of whether it was a foreign reported case or it was from which all source, so if it has been submitted to that particular NDA or ANDA or BLA as a 15-day report, it has to be included in that particular section. And this line listing of 15-day reports, which is a part of the PADER line listing generated from the safety database, should include the manufacturer report number, the adverse experience term, and the date of the 15-day report which was submitted to the US FDA. If both initial and follow-up reports were submitted to the FDA during the current reporting period, both the submission dates should get reflected in the PADER line listing. List of cases which need to be included in Section 1 of the PADER, which is the list for the cases submitted to the FDA under another NDA or ANDA. This list includes the cases in which the suspect drug or the biological product for which the PADER is being prepared was listed as one of the suspect products, but the report was submitted to the US FDA under another license number of the applicant holder. This generally occurs when there are multiple suspect products and the suspect product for which we are preparing the PADER is one of the suspect products, but not the one for which the report was submitted to the US FDA. And in case there is no such case, it should be clearly specified in the report that no such case exists for this particular PADER. Again, continuing with Section 1, this section should also include the tabulation of the events by the system organ class. Just to make it very clear, tabulation is always at the event level and listings are always at the case level. And this is applicable both for the PADERs and the PSURs. And this section should include a summary tabulation by the body system, that is cardiovascular or endocrine or renal or gastrointestinal, of all the adverse experience terms and counts of occurrences submitted during the reporting period. They should be included in this particular summary tabulation. And the information should be taken from 15-day reports submitted to the FDA, non-15-day reports submitted in the periodic report, reports forwarded to the applicant by the FDA, and any non-serious expected adverse experiences not submitted to the FDA but maintained on the file by the applicant in case applicant has a waiver for the report. And for the adverse experience terms, product interaction, the interacting products should be identified in this tabulation. Again, this section 1 should also include the narrative discussion of the 15-day alert reports. And this is another point which I would like to highlight, which is the difference between the PADERs and the PSURs. PADERs require the detailed discussion of all 15-day alert cases in the PADER report. However, for the PSUR, detailed discussion is required for only those cases which are considered to be a relevant safety concern. So this section of the PADER should include a narrative discussion of the clinical significance of the 15-day alert report submitted during the reporting period and of any increased reporting frequency of serious expected adverse experiences when the judgment of the applicant. And this narrative should assess clinical significance by adverse experience body system and the overall product safety relating the new information received during the reporting period to what was already known about the product. The narrative should also state what further actions, if any, the applicant plans to undertake based on the information gained during the reporting period and include the time period for completing the action. That is, when the applicant plans to start and finish the action and submit the information to the FDA. Now coming to the second section. So second section is the PADER. In the PADER is the narrative discussion of the actions taken. So the narrative discussion should indicate, based on the information learned during the reporting period, whether the applicant believes that no change in the product's current approved labeling is warranted, or there are safety related issues that need to be addressed in the approved product labeling. If changes in the approved product labeling are under consideration by the FDA, the date and the number of the supplemental application submitted to address the labeling changes should be stated in this particular section. So this section should include a copy of the current US product labeling and a list of any labeling changes made during the reporting period, and the labeling changes to be mentioned should be only the ones which are relevant from a safety perspective. So the other important information to be included in this section is the regulatory actions included, including foreign, for example, any new warnings or limitations in the indications and use of the product. And this should also include any communication of the new safety information, for example, any Dear Doctor letter, which is released or sent by the sponsor, sent by the pharmaceutical company to the physicians. Another important information to be included in section 2 of the PADER is the list of studies initiated by the company during the reporting period. And this includes the company's sponsored trials, which are focused on safety, with a brief narrative describing any safety trials or epidemiological studies initiated in response to any significant new information that might affect the safety of the product. This section just needs the brief summary of all these studies which are to be presented in this particular section. Now coming to section 3. So section 3 of the PADER is the index line listing. This section includes non-15-day cases, and the line listing of each non-15-day case submitted should be including a manufacturer report number and the adverse experience term. And along with the adverse experience term, earlier this section also required page numbers for the MedWatch forms to be included. But now, since all the non-15-day cases are submitted as E2B and not as MedWatch forms via ESG Gateway, this page number is not required to be included. And this section should also include the identification of the interacting products for any product interaction listed as an adverse experience. And this section is then further subdivided into a list of serious listed initial reports, non-serious unlisted initial reports, non-serious listed initial reports, and similarly follow up for the serious listed cases or non-serious unlisted cases and non-serious listed cases. So all these list of domestic spontaneous cases with the required parameters as requested by the FDA are generated from the safety database, and there are some standard reports which are configured in the safety database, and these listings are generated from the safety database and attached in the PADER and submitted to the FDA. Now, next section is section 4 of the PADER, though named as FDA Form 3500A as per the guidance document, but includes a list of spontaneously reported adverse experiences that occurred in the United States during the reporting period, that is serious expected, non-serious unexpected, and non-serious expected. And as we were discussing earlier, so applicants are encouraged to request a waiver of the requirement to submit individual case safety reports of non-serious expected adverse experiences for drugs and certain biological products, and adverse experiences due to failure to produce the expected pharmacological action, that is lack of effect, should be included in this section. And for individual case safety reports of serious expected adverse experiences, FDA encourages applicants to include relevant hospital discharge summaries and autopsy reports or death certificates, as well as a list of other relevant documents as described for 15-day reports of serious unexpected adverse experiences. Now, this slide shows different appendices for the PADER, and one of the appendices in the PADER is the PADER line listing, which is generated from the safety database, which includes list of 15-day reports by system organ class submitted, cases sent to the FDA under another product license or under another NDA or ANDA, tabulation by system organ class for all the events reported, that is summary tabulation. And then comes the index line listing, which includes a list of serious listed initial reports, non-serious unlisted initial reports, non-serious listed initial reports, and similarly serious listed follow-up reports, non-serious unlisted follow-up reports, and non-serious listed follow-up reports. And then there is another appendix which is submitted along with the PADER document as the labeling information, which is the current US product label for that particular product. Okay, so this is all what I have for today, and I will now request Dr. Sanjeev to talk about the periodic safety update reports. But before I hand over the presentation to Dr. Sanjeev, so I'll just like to introduce Dr. Sanjeev to everyone. So Dr. Sanjeev is the founder and director of AWINSA Life Sciences. He's an MD in internal medicine and has over 20 years of experience in the field of medicine, pharmacovigilance, and clinical research. In his last assignment, he was the Vice President of Safety and Medical Affairs at APSUR. And just before joining APSUR, Sanjeev was the Vice President for Pharmacovigilance and Medical Writing at Accenture. Before joining Accenture, Sanjeev was Chief Operating Officer and Scientific Director of CIDP Biotech. And prior to CIDP, Sanjeev was the Director of Medical Affairs at CliniRx. And before CliniRx, he worked with Ranbaxy as Senior Manager in the Department of Medical Affairs and Pharmacovigilance. He's also worked as Senior Resident in Cardiology and Medicine Department in some of the prestigious hospitals of New Delhi. And Sanjeev is a lifetime member of a Fellow of Indian Association of Clinical Medicines and has numerous publications in medical journals and books to his credit. So now I hand over the presentation to you, Sanjeev.
Thanks, Mukta, for this nice introduction. So today in my presentation, I'll be talking about some of the fundamental goals and principles of PSUR and provide an overview of the sessional review process. Firstly, it is important to understand the key objectives of the PSUR. So the primary purpose of any periodic safety update report, regardless of the regulatory authority involved, is to provide a comprehensive, concise, and critical analysis of the benefit-risk balance of a medicinal product. So this analysis basically takes into account both new or emerging safety information and cumulative data on the risks and benefits. So as a MAH, every company must continuously assess the risk-benefit profile of their product. So this assessment involves collaboration between, say, a signaling team, which is responsible for identifying potential risk, and the medical writing team, which is preparing the PSUR. So all relevant signaling data and the benefit risk assessment conducted by the PV or the signaling team should be included in the PSUR. Essentially, the PSUR practically serves as an evaluation tool at various time points. Now, From the US FDA perspective, as Mukta mentioned, quarterly PADERs are required during the initial 3 years and thereafter at different time points. Similarly, the European regulatory authorities may request PSURs every 6 months or at the time of renewal. It's important to note that different regulatory authorities have varying expectations for PSUR submissions at different intervals. Now, in the European Union, the PSURs follow the guidelines provided in the GEP Module 7, and this module outlines the various sections and structures to be included in the PSUR. So the format of the PSUR aligns with the requirements specified in the ICH E2C R2 guideline. It's important to highlight here that in order to enhance the efficient utilization of resources among different regulatory authorities in EU member states, a single assessment of PSURs is conducted for medicinal products that contain the same active substance or combination of active substances authorized in multiple member states. So this assessment is practically based on a union reference date and frequency of PSUR submission that have been established. So the EMA provides basically a legally binding list of union reference dates and submission frequencies. Now, from the perspective of the European Union, the GEP Module 7 provides clear guidelines on the frequency and timelines for the PSUR submissions. According to these guidelines, PSURs must be submitted to the regulatory authorities within 70 calendar days of the data log point for PSURs covering intervals up to 12 months. And if the interval is, say, exactly 12 months, the same 70-day timeline applies. However, if the reporting period or interval, say, is exceeding 12 months, then the PSURs must be submitted within 90 calendar days of the data log point as per GEP Module 7. It's important to note here that the competent authorities may request PSURs as per their specific requirements, and in such cases, the PSUR should be generally submitted within 90 calendar days of the data log point. Indeed, GEP Module 7 highlights important principles for the evaluation of risk-benefit profile within the PSUR. So one crucial principle, I would say, is that the benefit risk assessment of any medicinal product should be conducted throughout its entire life cycle. And this evaluation aims to provide and to promote and safeguard public health while enhancing patient safety throughout the effective management of the risk. So it's essential to continue assessing the benefits and risk of the medicinal product even after the marketing authorization has been granted by the regulatory authorities. So this ongoing evaluation practically ensures that the risk benefit profile remains favorable over time. The scope of benefit information considered in the evaluation should encompass both data from clinical trials and the real world data obtained during post-authorization use in the approved indication. So basically, by incorporating the real world evidence data, the assessment provides a kind of a comprehensive understanding of products effectiveness and safety in the real world settings. Now, when it comes to the European PSURs, relevant data pertaining to a specific indication, dosage form, route of administration, or dosing regimen should be presented in the separate sections of the PSUR, and each aspect should be appropriately addressed within the report. In general, a single PSUR is required for a medicinal product or active moiety in the EU. The single PSUR should cover all dosages, formulations, and routes of administration. Unlike in the US states, like as Mukta explained, where separate PADERs may be required or prepared for different formulations or different ANDAs, the EU follows the principle of a single comprehensive PSUR. However, again, there can be always exceptions to the rule. For example, if there's an entirely different formulation for a distinct indication and the MAH is providing a rationale, a separate PSUR may be allowed. So it's important to note that for any exceptions or a separate PSURs, in such scenarios, any exceptions or separate PSUR should be agreed upon with the relevant regulatory or the competent authority in the EU during the authorization process. Now, in the EU PSUR, the case narratives are typically required only when there is a significant signal or an important event that is relevant from the safety perspective. So these case narratives should not be kind of presented as a raw data directly. Instead, the aim is to provide a clinically meaningful picture by presenting a cohesive picture of the cases. So the idea is to convey the relevant information in a way that is understandable and valuable for the assessment of safety. Furthermore, each PSUR should include both interval data as well as the cumulative data. And the interval data pertains to the specific reporting period covered by the PSUR, while the cumulative data is basically encompassing all the relevant safety information accumulated over time. So this comprehensive presentation of data allows for a thorough evaluation of the safety profile of the medicinal product. Now, I would like to highlight an important aspect of the periodic report, which is the reference safety information. In fact, we did a webinar specifically on the reference safety information as per the CTFG guidance document last week. So this RSI plays a significant role in various reports such as PSURs, DSURs, or any kind of periodic report. So practically, this is an essential part of the company core data sheet, which contains the company core safety information. Now, within this company core data sheet, there are some specific sections that are important from an RSA perspective, like adverse events or contraindication, warnings, precautions, pregnancy, lactation, drug interaction, and overdose. So practically the safety section. So these sections contain crucial safety information that must be carefully reviewed and considered in the PSUR or any periodic report. Also, there is a section in the report that addresses any changes to the RSI. And if there are any specific changes to the aforementioned sections, like adverse event, contraindications, or warning, pregnancy, so this is important to appropriately address these changes in the PSUR or other periodic reports. So in cases where there's no existing CCDS or company core safety information, the marketing authorization holder should clearly state which SPC or labeling document is used as the safety document for that particular product. And transparency regarding the source of safety information is important in such cases. Now, every MAH should have a kind of a robust quality system and procedure in place to ensure that the PSURs are prepared appropriately, and the quality checks and controls should be implemented at all the levels of the process, including the maintenance of the RSI and the overall report preparation. So it's essential to have well-documented, well-defined policies and procedures within the quality system, and these policies and procedures should clearly outline the processes involved in the preparation of the PSUR and maintenance of the RSI. So this ensures that there is a kind of a consistency, accuracy, and adherence to the regulatory requirements throughout the process. Now, the quality system should establish effective communication and coordination between multiple stakeholders involved in the PSUR. Like there could be different departments, or maybe there is a medical writing team, or of course the PV team, which is mainly handling the main activities, or there is a regulatory team or the QA team. So there has to be an effective collaboration between different departments, and ensuring appropriate coordination amongst these stakeholders helps to maintain the quality and integrity of the PSURs. By having proper quality systems and procedures and interdepartmental coordination, the marketing authorization holders can ensure the appropriate preparation and submissions of high quality PSURs in line with the quality standards as per the expectations of the regulatory authorities. Now, the responsible person for pharmacovigilance or the qualified person for pharmacovigilance plays a very critical role in ensuring that the staff members basically involved in the PSUR activities are trained regularly and appropriately. So it's essential to have qualified and experienced people in pharmacovigilance, medical writing, or even quality control who are involved in the review and QA of the PSURs. And the responsible person or the QPPV should ensure that all the relevant people in PV team have received adequate training and their training records are appropriately documented. These training records serve as an evidence that the required training has been completed prior to engaging in the PSUR activities. So these records are important not only from internal perspective, but also for the audits conducted by the regulatory authorities like MHRA or EMA or even FDA. Now, having well-documented training records demonstrate compliance with the regulatory requirements and showcase the competency and qualification of the individuals involved in the preparation and review of periodic documents, including PSURs, and it ensures that the staff members are equipped with necessary knowledge and skills to fulfill their roles effectively and contribute to the quality and regulatory compliance of the PSURs. So the PSUR contains numerous sections. So this is the busy slide. Of course, I'll not spend much time on this slide. Of course, I would go into the individual sections briefly, just to provide or let you know the importance of these sections. And practically, at the end of the day, it's important that we have the right conclusion for any periodic report. And this conclusion is vital for regulatory authorities and stakeholders to make informed decisions about the ongoing safety of the medicinal product. So here I have highlighted some of the key elements. Again, this is as per GEP module, and these key elements should be included in the executive summary of a periodic report. And the purpose of the executive summary is to provide a concise overview of the report's content and convey the most important information. The summary should begin with some kind of introduction, and it should provide some essential details about the medicinal product, such as therapeutic class or mechanism of action, indication, pharmaceutical formulation. It should also include information on the estimated cumulative clinical trial exposure if the product is still undergoing clinical trials. It's important basically to, in fact, emphasize here that the safety information from the clinical trials should be included in the PSUR, and this information should be relevant and aligned with the overall safety perspective of the report. So the summary should also present the estimated interval and the cumulative post-marketing exposure data. So this summary should also mention the countries where the medicinal product is authorized. It should kind of summarize the overall benefit risk evaluation, including any actions that have been taken or proposed for safety reasons. So basically, it should serve as a concise snapshot of the periodic report, providing an overview of the most important safety information and the key aspects of the benefit risk profile of the product. In the introduction section of the periodic report, which is section 1, there are several details which should be highlighted. So like the IBD, the reporting period, brief description of the approved indication, medicinal product information, which should include the information about the medicinal product itself, such as the mode of action, therapeutic class, dose, and route of administration. So these details practically help in providing a comprehensive understanding of the product which is being evaluated. So normally a single PSUR is required. However, in some cases, multiple PSURs may be submitted based on a prior agreement with the competent authority, as I mentioned earlier. And in case multiple PSURs are included, the rationale for this exception should be provided, explaining why it was necessary to submit multiple reports. And the introduction section sets the stage for the rest of the periodic report, providing essential background information and contextual details about the product and the reporting period. The section 2, which is worldwide marketing authorization approval status, is basically supposed to have a narrative or a tabular format. Of course, if there is no authorization or minimal authorization applicable, we can always summarize in some paragraph, but then practically there is a narrative or a tabular formation that has to be used, and it should have the date of first authorization, the worldwide authorizations, or the list of the countries where the product is authorized. So this parameter should practically specify the countries or regions where the product has received marketing authorization, and the list should be comprehensive, including all the countries where the product is authorized for use. And the purpose of this section practically is to provide an overview of the worldwide MA status of the product and to highlight the breadth of its approved indication and authorized countries. So it helps demonstrate the global reach and acceptance of the product in various regulatory jurisdictions. Section 3 is action taken in the reporting period for safety reasons, and again, it's a very important aspect of the PSUR. This section is practically highlighting any significant actions that have been taken during the reporting interval from safety perspective, and this should be described for both post-marketing as well as clinical trial settings. And the purpose of this section is to provide a kind of comprehensive overview of the actions taken in relation to safety during the reporting period. It helps to demonstrate the proactive measures which are taken to ensure patient safety and the management of the potential risks which are associated with the medicinal product. Section 4 is basically changes to RSI, which is again a very important part of the PSUR. This section focus on any changes made to any specific sections, again pertaining to safety, which is like warning, precautions, contraindication, lactation, drug interactions, overdose. Any changes made to this specific section of the RSI should be very clearly documented. This would include any updates or revisions, additions or deletions made to the information provided in this section. And it's very important to highlight any significant changes that may impact the safety profile of the medicinal product. So the purpose of this section is to provide transparency regarding any modifications or update made to the RSI and to ensure that the latest version of the RSI is accessible for review. It helps the stakeholders like regulatory authorities to stay informed about the changes in the safety information of the medicinal product. Then the section 5 is practically pertaining to estimated exposure and use patterns, providing information about the extent of the patient exposure to the medicinal product. This section is very important for assessing the overall safety profile of the product. If the product is still in the clinical trial phase, this section should include data on the patient exposure from the ongoing trials, and this can be expressed in terms of the number of patients enrolled in the trials, the duration of the exposure, any specific subpopulation included in the trials. And if the product is, say, already in the market, then this section should practically provide data on the patient exposure based on the actual usage of the product. This can be estimated using various parameters such as, say, number of units which were sold, the prescribed dosage regimen, and then the duration of treatment. So by dividing, say, the number of units sold by the estimated average daily dose and treatment duration, we can get an approximate idea of the number of patients which are exposed to the product. And the calculated exposure can be in terms of different format, like the patient treatment days or patient treatment year, or like in antibiotic, we can have patient treatment courses. So depending on the specific characteristics of the product, so we calculate the patient exposure. In section 6, the data has to be presented in the form of summary tabulation, and the purpose of this section is to provide an overview of the adverse events associated with the medicinal product. And the data presented in this section should be at the event level, which means that the individual adverse events are summarized and reported. Meta coding has to be used to categorize and classify the adverse events in the safety database. And the coding is basically to be done at the preferred level term, which represents specific medical concepts within the MEDRA terminologies. Section 7 is again a summary of significant findings from the clinical trials during the reporting period. So these findings could be any new signals or important identified risk or important potential risk associated with medicinal product. And when we are presenting the data for this section 7, it's important to categorize it appropriately, especially if there are any differences observed between different populations or age groups. For example, if a safety signal is identified specifically in the elderly population or in the pediatric population, it should be very clearly mentioned and categorized accordingly. And in this section, the aim is to provide a concise summary of the significant finding without going into the details or analysis. So the more comprehensive evaluation and analysis of safety signals are typically covered in separate sections of PSUR, such as section 15 for safety signals and section 16.2 for the overall evaluation of the signal. So here the focus is on providing an overview and brief summary of the significant findings. So in addition to the finding from the clinical trial, the PSUR should also include relevant finding from the known interventional trials and the known interventional studies. So this ensures that any new safety information, regardless of the study type, is captured and reported in the periodic reports. Similarly, there could be findings from other clinical trials. It could be finding from the other non-interventional trial. At the end of the day, the idea is to provide some kind of a summary from these trials. Of course, the relevant safety information is required to be captured. Then section 10 is practically for the non-clinical data, and it should provide valuable information about the safety of the medicinal product based on the lab experiments and the animal studies. And these studies help in assessing the potential risk and toxicity associated with the product. Literature information is a very important source of the safety data that should be considered when we are preparing the PSUR. And the PV or the medical writing team who is preparing the PSUR should review the relevant scientific literature, including the published articles, the conference proceedings and the other relevant sources to identify any new safety information that may impact the benefit risk profile of the medicinal product. So it's not that we have to include all the abstracts in the PSUR. We have to extract and summarize the relevant safety information from the literature sources. And if a specific abstract contains some important safety data, it is always advisable to provide full details of the article, and we have to ensure that there's a clear documentation of the findings. Now, in case multiple reports are prepared for different formulations of the same medicinal product, it's very important to provide a rationale for the approach, and the rationale should explain why multiple reports are being submitted and how they differ from each other, as I mentioned in one of my earlier slides. In the case of lack of efficacy observed in clinical trial controlled for a medicinal product, it is important to provide a summary of the information in the periodic report. This summary should highlight the relevant details and any significant differences in efficacy compared to the established conventional therapy or the standard of care. So the purpose of providing this summary is to draw attention to any findings of decreased efficacy that are of concern or differ from the expectations. If there is any late-breaking safety information that becomes available after the data cutoff point of the periodic report, it is important to include a summary of that information. Basically, this ensures that the report provides the most up-to-date safety profile of the medicinal product. Section 15 is basically dedicated to the overview of the safety signals. It's important to document any new signals that have been identified during the reporting period. So these new signals refer to the safety concerns that were not previously known or reported. Additionally, if there is any ongoing signal that has not yet been confirmed or it does not warrant a change in the prescribing information, so it can be categorized as ongoing. That means that any further monitoring and assessment is required to determine its significance. And conversely, if a signal is assessed and deemed not relevant, or if a decision is taken to update the PI or the SPC based on the signal, it should be documented as closed. So this indicates that the signal has been resolved or addressed through appropriate actions such as updating the PI. And the purpose of documenting new, ongoing, and the closed signals is to provide a comprehensive overview of the safety profile of the medicinal product. Section 16, which is the next slide, it is basically focusing on the evaluation of the risk associated with the medicinal product, and it includes the information like new important identified, new important potential risk, the risk minimization measures. So the purpose of this section is to provide a comprehensive evaluation of the risk associated with the medicinal product and to highlight any kind of a new or a potential risk that have also been identified. Section 17 of the periodic report focuses on the evaluation of the benefit associated with the medicinal product, and it includes information like, say, conventional therapies which are applicable, and this section should provide information about the existing conventional therapy that are applicable to the indication or the condition which is being treated. So it kind of helps in establishing a reference point for comparing the benefits of the medicinal product. And practically, the advantages are that if the medicinal product being evaluated offers any new advantage compared to the existing conventional therapy, those advantages should be clearly described, and they may include improved efficacy or safety, tolerability, convenience of use, or any other relevant factors. So the purpose of this section is to evaluate and characterize the benefits of the medicinal product, particularly in comparison to the existing conventional therapies. Now, if we look at the section 8, which is integrated benefit risk analysis, so the periodic report should practically provide a comprehensive assessment of the overall benefit risk profile of the medicinal product, and this includes medical need or fulfillment of the unmet needs. So the integrated benefit risk analysis provides a holistic assessment of the medicinal product, considering both its benefits and risk in the context of the medical need and unmet needs, which this is addressing, and it aims to provide a balanced view of the product's overall value in the patient care and the treatment. And in the conclusion section of the PSUR document, a concise summary of the overall benefit risk profile should be provided, and this section should have basically an overall assessment. So this conclusion should summarize the overall assessment based on the data and the information presented in the report, and it should practically consider factors such as efficacy, safety, unmet needs, and the risk minimization measures, and say if there are any changes in the benefit risk profile of the product compared to the previous assessment. So that should be very clearly stated. So it should very clearly indicate the new signals or any ongoing signals or close signals that have been identified during the reporting period, and the impact of these changes on the benefit risk balance should be evaluated and described. So if there are any new risk minimization activities implemented to address any specific risk associated with the product, so obviously that should be very clearly mentioned in the conclusion, and this highlights the proactive measures taken to mitigate the risk and improve the patient safety. If there are any restrictions or limitations on the use of the medicinal product, such as say specific age group or patient populations, they should be very clearly documented in the conclusion, and this ensures that any relevant information regarding the safe and the effective use of the product is communicated. So practically the conclusion section, which is the most important section, should provide a summary of the key findings and the update regarding the benefit risk profile of the medicinal product, and it serves as a clear and a concise summary for the regulatory authorities, HCPs, I mean like the healthcare professionals and other stakeholders. I think that's all that we have for PSURs as well as PADERs. So I would request Sharon if you want to take the questions.
Yes, we have several great questions. The first, I think, can go to Magda. Are all spontaneous cases required to be captured in PADERs?
Sure. Thank you so much, Sharon. So this is a good question. So spontaneous cases, if we talk about spontaneous cases which have to be included, so these are anyways for 15-day alert reports, the spontaneous cases will be included, any spontaneous case or literature case. But if we talk about the non-15-day cases, which are the non-expedited cases, so only those spontaneous cases which are arising from the US, for which the country of origin is the US, they have to be reported, like the serious expected cases or non-serious expected or non-serious unexpected cases. They will only be included in the PADER if they originate from the US. In case there is any non-serious case which is not from the US, so that is not required to be included in the PADER. So that is based on the requirements of the PADERs. I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, thanks, Magda. And I think the second question can go to you as well. How are the clinical trial cases taken into account in PADERs?
Sure, thank you so much, Sharon. So this question again, the clinical trial cases, so this would happen in scenarios, when the clinical trial is being conducted for any product which is also marketed or approved in the US. So in that scenario, any case, any clinical trial SUSAR, which is actually reportable in the US in the IND, will also get reported to the NDA because product is also marketed in the US. So any clinical trial case which gets reported to the NDA or ANDA of that particular product, so then it becomes a part of the PADER and should be included in the list of 15-day reports, that is serious and unexpected reports in the list of PADERs. So the list of the cases. So any clinical trial case which is reported in the ND or AND or BLA has to be included in the PADER in the section of 15-day alert reports.
Thanks, Magda. The next question can go to Sanjeev. If there is any significant safety information received after DLP, how is that handled in PSURs?
Sure, Sharon. I'll take this question. So, yeah, so if there is any kind of a late breaking relevant safety information that becomes available after the data lock point, so we have to basically provide a summary of that information. So basically, in a way, the process is that when we reach to a data lock point, so practically say 1 month down the line, we should have a process where we should kind of generate some kind of a listing. Of course, that listing is not required to be captured in the reports, and I think the same principle applies for the DSUR also. Practically, like we take the listings just to review the data to see if there is any signal or something is basically getting some particular safety concern is becoming evident. So most of the time there is a chance that or a possibility that there will be no safety concern. But yes, as you asked, if there is any safety concern, if there is a new signal, then we can always summarize that and provide that information. And of course, if it is so significant, we can always provide in detail. Otherwise, routinely the intent is to just basically have some kind of listing for our record to see if there is any new safety concern coming up, and if there is any concern that comes up as per the GEP module or even for the DSUR regulation. So we have to provide a summary of that particular information. And if there are a couple of cases that comes during that period, then of course we can provide even some narratives of those cases if required, if that makes the assessment easier. So practically what GEP module says is to provide a summary of that significant safety information if that comes after the data lock point.
Thanks, Sanjeev. So we have 3 more additional questions. The next question can go to you as well, Sanjeev. For lack of efficacy, do we need to provide the case narratives?
No, we don't need to have the case narrative. First of all, case narratives are required for those cases where there is a signal that is coming up. In a way, like if you look, and again, I think this is similar to DSUR reports also, like, and the GP module talks similarly in PSUR. So lack of efficacy doesn't mean that we have to prepare case narrative. It is basically, in a way, this section is kind of describing any kind of therapeutic failure of a product which is in relation or compared to the established conventional therapy. In fact, this is a typical example given in the module also. Like say if there is a standard antiplatelet regimen, and now if you are having a new antiplatelet regimen for which you are preparing the PSUR, now if there is a kind of a relative high level of lack of efficacy as a result of which the patients are in fact having some coronary artery diseases or myocardial infarction because the antiplatelet drug is not working. So basically that becomes a kind of a safety concern. So in that regard, if there are any such kind of therapies which are failing compared to the existing conventional therapies, so then that becomes a cause of concern. So that has to be summarized. Otherwise, idea is not to present some kind of narratives just in a structured manner. That's absolutely not the intent of GEP module. We have to just basically provide any kind of a significant safety information if we are able to derive based on any kind of significant lack of information that is happening with the product.
Thanks, Sanjeev. For the next question, for Magda, can PSURs be submitted in the US?
Sure, thank you so much, Sharon. Yes, definitely. PSURs can be submitted in case the applicant holder gets a waiver from the FDA that instead of PADERs, they would like to submit the PSURs in the PSUR format, along with some additional requirements, as we were discussing in some of the earlier slides, wherein we were discussing about the waivers. So this is one kind of waiver wherein there can be a PSUR which can be submitted instead of PADERs, but it will have certain additional requirements of submission of the non-expedited cases or the labeling information, and and based on the guidance, we would have to provide that along with the PSUR.
Thanks, Magda. Our last question, I think Sanjeev can address. How is the data for non-interventional trials included in the PSUR?
Sure, thanks, Sharon. So yeah, if there are any non-interventional trials, like say some observation studies or any studies which do not require any intervention specifically, of course, for those non-interventional trials, the intent is to only get any relevant safety information. The intent is not to provide again some kind of listings or summary tabulation. So as long as we have a summary of any significant safety information, if we have, so that has to be presented in the PSUR.
So that's all our questions. Thanks everybody for your participation.
Thanks a lot, Sharon. Thanks, Mugdha. So I think there are still probably a couple of questions, but we're running short of time, so we can always take them later. Thanks a lot. Thanks everyone for attending.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for attending the webinar. Thank you all. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.